I first met Frank at the Ivey Academy, the Ivey Business School, during a leadership course. I was assigned as his coach for him and his cohort. And so I had exposure to him in action, and I got to know him quite well. And I found that his keen insights and his approach to leadership really struck a chord. As we worked closely, I saw firsthand his commitment not just to enhancing his skills, but elevating everyone around him. He stands out for his deeply human approach to leadership, and I really got to see that in action. I knew that his approach, leading as if he is leading a family, is something that would resonate with you, and I was very pleased that he accepted my invitation to come here. So enjoy the conversation with Frank, and let's learn more about the way he leads his family. Enjoy the conversation. Welcome to the Navigating Disruption podcast. I'm Shaquille Barmel, your host. As the founder of Ocean Blue Strategic, an executive coach at the Ivey Academy, and a partner with the Summit Group, I spend my days exploring the intricacies of leadership, customer relationships, and strategic thinking. Here, we connect with fascinating individuals from various walks of life to discover how we can make a more significant impact in these complex times as leaders, colleagues, and sales professionals, and more importantly, how we can grow as human beings. Before we begin today's episode, I acknowledge that we are recording from the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. As I am a stone's throw from the meeting of the Ottawa, Gatineau, and Rideau rivers, it's important to recognize this area's rich history as a gathering place. For hundreds, or probably thousands of years, where these rivers meet has been a site of exchange, of goods, yes, but also ideas and cultures. And they continue to flow through this, our virtual community, shaping our interactions and hopefully our future. Frank, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing fantastic, Shaquille. How are you doing?
Good. It's great to see your smiling face. And just wanted to let you know that I've been on hiatus for a couple of years from this podcast. And so you are actually one of my first conversations back.
Fantastic. What an honor.
Yeah, no, well, I'm glad you feel that way. That's awesome. And I'll tell you, there was a particular moment that we'll get into when we were interacting where I thought to myself, you'd make a really good guest on the podcast. And then I went into hiatus, and then I thought about it again. And second time I saw you, and I said, okay, when I get back going, you got to be one of the first. So here you are.
Excellent.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, let's quickly let people know how we know each other. You were taking a leadership course with the Ivey Business School, the Ivey Academy, where I'm on the coaching faculty, and I got to work with you and a small group of people through those few days on that course, as well as then follow up afterwards. And then we continued to work together a little bit. That's kind of how we know each other.
Yeah, it was fantastic. It was wonderful meeting you, and you were such a great addition to my portfolio of expanding my horizons with some leadership coaching, and I'm forever grateful for it.
Awesome. Well, maybe we'll touch on some of those experiences, but let's start with I'd love to give you a chance just to kind of share with the audience kind of the basics of who you are, what you do, your role, and then we'll get a little deeper from there.
Sure. Yeah, so my name is Francesco Bozzo, or Frank Bozzo, as I'm referred to. And I've been with CHEP Canada for 21 years. Presently, I lead the Canadian business as well as the Pallecon business, which is the container business for North America. So I'm the vice president and general manager for both business units.
Okay, fantastic. Give me a sense of size. How many people in your kind of entire organization that you're responsible for?
Yeah, so between both organizations, between the salary staff and the hourly staff, I would say it's probably about roughly 1,800.
1,800. Okay, so that's quite a big organization, and you've been leading them through a very interesting last several years. I'm sure there's much to talk about there. First, let's dive in a little bit, because I am very confident that, at least for my listeners and probably for most of the world, that CHEP is probably one of the largest companies that people have never heard of, right? It's unless you're kind of in supply chain, in distribution, most people don't know of CHEP, and that's probably perfectly okay with you.
Yeah,
right?
It's interesting. Yeah. We fly under the radar, but we truly are the invisible backbone of the supply chain. And I'll
Yeah.
share a funny story. When during the pandemic, my daughter was at school, and all the kids were talking about what their parents do for a living. And
Yeah.
my daughter explained it very simply to her team. Or to her students. She said, if it wasn't for my father and his company, you would never eat. And it's because,
Yeah.
as being the invisible backbone of the supply chain, all goods, primarily all the goods across Canada are moving on our pallets and are moving throughout the distribution channel. So when you walk through the commercial outfits or the retail outfits, you'll see blue pallets, and those are our pallets that we use to distribute goods across Canada.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure most people don't realize or think about as they're walking through a grocery store, walking through any kind of retail situation, ordering even from Amazon, that everything they receive likely was on a pallet. And
Indeed.
just because your size and your role in the world, it was likely one of yours, one of your
That's
pallets.
that's that's a valid statement. Indeed, for
Yeah,
sure.
amazing, amazing. Okay, so lots of I just love that one of the biggest companies that people haven't heard of. So people will now start opening their eyes a little bit and looking for your blue high quality pallets. I came across you early in my career. My first job, I spent some time in a distribution center in a warehouse, and you were one of the pallets that came through our distribution center, and that was I don't know, I was 23 years old, so it's been around a long time, and you're all over the world, right?
We operate in 60 countries.
Yeah,
And it's funny, I came across the pallets back in my youth as well, working in the grocery
yeah,
business while I was
yeah.
going to school. So that would have been back nearly 40 years ago.
Yeah, wow. Okay. So that's the question of kind of what you do publicly, what your role is. Now's the bigger question, Frank, and one that some people find hard to answer, but let's see how you think about it. How do you think about your role in the world, or your role with the people you work with and the communities you're part of? What How do you describe your impact, or what you try to be your impact?
It's interesting, Shaquille, because I think for me, that really plays into this whole notion of what is the legacy you leave behind? How do people remember you or the impact you made on the organization and the community you serve? So for me, I treat the business as an extension of my family. And if anyone you speak to within my organization, they would speak to that. And I always joke and often say, families don't always get along, and families have disagreements, but we work together and take care of each other through difficult times. Now, having said that, we also ensure that we serve the communities around us. It's very important to me and to my team that we do that. So you have to think of opportunities with Food Bank Canada, think of opportunities for us to volunteer as an organization. These are things that I think I instill in my team. It's extremely important that they take that seriously and that they realize that there's a significant impact that we can make on the communities that we serve. So they're all given 3 days of volunteer days that are fully paid for by the company to encourage that behavior. But what's interesting is that behavior trickles into the office as well. And you'll see people bring things forward and opportunities forward where they see needs in the community that we can work collectively together on trying to solve, or at least play a bigger role and a bigger part in that. As an organization, it's really important because we're far more than just a logistics or a supply chain provider. It's really about how we take care of our fellow people that are in need around us.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. So when you think about what does that do for the culture of your workplace? What does it do for individual people to make it, because you make that such an important part of the way you do business?
I think it makes them feel proud of who they work for.
Yeah,
It definitely
yeah,
plays a role in our retention. We have, our retention is very high, and the average tenure in our organization is quite high. And this isn't a group that's complacent. We're always pushing the envelope forward. We're always looking for new ways to innovate and become a better version of ourselves every day. But having said that, they take some serious pride in who they represent. And what's funny is that it actually trickles down into their households. And what I mean by that specifically is, we have some giving back events where we include families. So they bring their kids to the event, they bring their spouses to the event. And what's often said to us by the spouses or by the children, that they can't believe the unity that they see within the organization and how seriously we take this and how well we work together as a team. And that to me, I think is core to our culture and core to what makes us successful and quite frankly separates us from a lot of the competition that's out there as well.
yeah. I mean, let me validate that, because I had a chance. You invited me to do some work with your team, a very large event, and I spent a couple of days with you, and I have to say that I can totally validate that. There was a spirit, there was a culture, there was a caring, There was a commitment to the work that you were doing as an organization that was really important. I talked to people that had been around for years. I had talked to people that had left but had come back, and there was very clearly a strong affinity, affiliation, emotion connected to the culture of the organization. So kudos to that. I found myself quite inspired being there, and really enjoyed being with let's call it your family. I didn't use that term at that time, but since you used the term, you called it family. And now that I think about it, it did feel that way. It did feel that people felt that way. So if family is a big part of how you define what you bring to your organization, to your roles, to your life, where do you think that came from? Was there and maybe let me assume, do you see yourself, and a little bit of a loaded question, do you see yourself as a leader of the organization that you're part of, as the leader of the family?
Oh, 100%. I think for
Yeah.
me, it's deep rooted, right? If I think back to my career and different leaders that have kind of shaped and molded me and different mentors, one thing that's unique is the involvement even within my household. So my spouse, my wife, is a big part of my success and is a big part of who I am today. But part of that is because she understands the extension of the family. She understands what's important to me within the organization. She knows people within the organization. There's very few people that work within CHEP that I don't know their spouses or their children's names. And some organizations or some leaders think that that's rare, that's kind of either unnecessary, or they don't have the time for it. But it's these simple, subtle things that, for example, every single salary employee in our organization, their birthday's in my calendar. I take 2 minutes to wish them a happy birthday. It's not a generic message. It's a genuine happy birthday. And I think most leaders lose sight of the fact that those are the things that are extremely important for people. Those are the things that really make people feel that they belong in an organization. Yeah. And quite frankly, they think twice about leaving the organization because they have that sense of unity and commitment within the organization.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not actually hard to do, right?
No.
To pop off a happy birthday message. But the impact is so much larger than the effort that you put into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a little things, right? Like, instead of sending a message from an email, I may send it through a chat or through a personal text message. It seems more personal. It doesn't seem like it came from my assistant. They know it comes from me, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's an interesting touch. So you think a lot about those little things and how they make a difference. Frank, I talk a lot about nostalgia and the power of our experiences as a child and the people that we've interacted with. When you think about the way you are as a leader, and particularly this emphasis on family, can you connect the dots back to experiences and people in your childhood that kind of set the stage for this?
Yeah, I came from a European background. Family is important. And it's funny because I grew up where my grandparents lived next door to me, and my other set of grandparents lived with us. So I was surrounded by family all the time, arguably too much. But having said that, I think that how I think it translated to my youth and then into my adult life is that even as a young boy playing soccer, I was a captain of the team. As a teenager playing football in high school, I was the captain of the high school football team, and it was always about bringing people together. And oftentimes, there's a joke within some of my old high school friends where, I was involved in so many different things, from playing the lead role of Jesus in a play to being the captain of the football team to getting people together, and it was just that notion of being surrounded by good people. And I think that to me is important. Life is short, so if we're going to spend a lot of time with the folks that we work with, then you need to work with people that you respect and that you care about.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. I love that. And so part of what you felt being the leader of the family was partly just to surround yourself with people that you liked and create the energy. I always say that, we need to be all responsible for the energy we bring into the room.
Absolutely.
Expand that to the energy we bring into the family, the world, whatever it is. That is how it sounds like you think about things.
Yeah, all the time. And I think for me, it's not just about, when people think of family, they think, oh, well, it must be all kumbaya and there's no ramifications for people's decisions or actions, and it's quite the opposite. My standards, and my team will tell you, are extremely high. But what's interesting is that because of those standards, everyone kind of elevates their game, and we all operate at a very high level and very fast paced. But when you have a common respect for the people around you, and you work that extra harder to achieve things together as a team, that sense of unity and purpose resonates within the organization, and people feel it.
Yeah. And so you talked about your grandparents living with you and your grandparents living beside you. You know, when you were younger, tell me what that experience was like when you came home from school. Kind of what were the things that happened? I mean, I was a bit of a latchkey kid. I came home and there was nobody home. My brother was home, and as he got older, he wasn't home either. So it's very different to me to hear this. Tell me about what that was like when you came home from school.
Yeah, it's funny when I talk to people about it, they think I'm kidding, but it was reality. It was very strange because I had many friends that had grandparents that lived abroad, and they had very small families. So for me, I always joke saying that I had essentially three fathers. You know, I had three people disciplining me, whether it was my father or one of my grandfathers. It was one of them would pick up the slack for the other. That was for sure. And then with the grandmothers is you have three people feeding you, right? You have your mother, everyone's trying to feed you, right, all the time. So it was really a matter of, coming home and being surrounded by good people and being surrounded by family, essentially. And but that also forced me into a bit more responsibility than I probably would have liked back then, because I think the expectation was that now that I was home and I was the oldest of my three brothers, it was, hey, listen, why don't you work on this, or can you help me with this? And you're getting pulled in multiple directions to kind of help out and step up, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So more so than probably I would have liked as a young child, but it did teach me a lot about respect. It did teach me a lot about just work ethic in general.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting. I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Yeah. So you always had somebody's eyes on you, watching what you're doing, making sure
Indeed,
you're staying on the path, right?
indeed, yeah, always, all the
Yeah.
time.
Were you the eldest of your siblings?
I was the eldest, yes.
Ah, okay. That like you said, responsibility of being the eldest, lots of scrutiny, lots of eyes on you. Yeah, that's a lot to grow up with. And I'm sure at times you were like, why me? Why do I get all this attention? And why can't I just get away with things? And why the responsibility? But now when you think about that, how do you think about all those experiences, influences, pressures?
I think it shaped me to who I am today completely. Like for me, I mean,
Yeah.
it wasn't just about being the oldest of my brothers; it was also being the oldest grandchild. So now,
Mm.
you have aunts and uncles that are influential. You have, younger cousins that are looking up to you. You have younger brothers that are
Mhm.
looking up to you. So it does shape you for sure. And I think
Mhm.
I've always had that type of leadership mentality because not that
Mhm.
it was forced upon me, but I was always put in an environment where that was put to test.
Yeah.
And because of that completely shaped who I am today.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. So I want to take that somewhere else here where I first met you. I remember our very first interaction. I was actually on vacation with my family in the Maritimes, and we had our very first kind of introductory conversation before that program in London, Ontario. And you were super self-aware, and I remember thinking how committed you were to your ongoing development as a leader. And you were like transparent, honest, and open in that first conversation. You trusted me very quickly. So one, thank you for that.
Mhm.
Um, but one of the things that I want to reflect on is with all your responsibilities for leadership. Now, I was thinking in your corporate career, but in reality, you've been a leader ever since you were a child because you've been the eldest, and then you went and lead sports teams and that kind of thing. So, if you've been a leader for basically most of your life, how do you think about your continued development as a leader? Like, have you already arrived? Are you already a great leader, or is it something that's a pursuit? And how do you think about that pursuit?
Yeah, I don't think you ever arrive. I
Mm,
think if you feel that you've arrived, you've failed yourself and the people around you. Because the
mm,
reality is, there are things that we can learn every single day. There are ways to improve every single day. There are people that join my leadership team that test different things about my interactions with them, or that test my beliefs on certain things. So I think that for me, being self-aware is key, and oftentimes I think we fall into the trouble into the hole of thinking that the way we do things is the best way of doing things,
mhm,
or that we believe we have the answers to all the questions. And when we first met, I remember one of the things that you and I had talked about specifically was, how do I stop stepping into situations? How do I stop providing my perspective or guiding the conversations, right? And I remember that when you and I first connected, one of my very first 360 feedbacks for my teams back then was that I was very directive, and that was part of my leadership style, and that bothered me to my core. And the reason why is because I always felt that now that I stepped into leading because I went from a commercial role to now leading the entire organization, I always felt that I wanted to be more visionary, and I wanted to provide that vision to the organization and inspiration. So what was interesting is that 2 years post my promotion into the role of leadership, I did the survey again, and it was funny how that completely shifted into being more visionary. But I really feel that part of that journey was really taking the moments to pause and not inject myself into the conversation, taking the moments to solicit feedback. Oftentimes as leaders, we already know where we want to go, or we think we know where we want to go. But the problem is we don't give our teams an opportunity to express their interest or their intent and their willingness to want to join us on that journey. So it's just giving them the opportunity to speak and provide their perspective. Now, as a leader, you may or may not take it, or you may take bits and pieces of it, but at least you've incorporated them in the journey. So my team never feels that they're left behind. My team never feels that there's a disconnect, that there's a gap. They always feel part of the process. So when you think about the evolution, I think for me, it comes down to in life, you're always going to have different methodologies, different ways of leading, depending on the situation. And that'll always test different skill sets. And that I think is really important because I think as leaders is once we acknowledge that, that gives us the opportunity to kind of improve and create that environment for our team members.
Yeah, that is actually very remarkable the way you strung all that together, because of course I remember that initial conversation, and I was thinking to myself through that how deliberate you were being. Like the 360 that you did with me was probably one of many that you've done over your career. I think you mentioned that you'd done others, but you're almost quite surgical about the feedback you were looking at, what it told you about how people see you, how you wanted people to be seen, as you just articulated. And it wasn't really it wasn't negative. Like this idea that you picked up that you were seen as directive didn't come across as a negative on you, because you are quite a caring leader, right? When you are a caring leader and people see that you're family oriented and you want to do good things for them in the organization, that directiveness doesn't come off as negative. But you yourself said that is not the way I want to come off. I want people to buy in. I want to be visionary, and I want to create that. You deliberately worked on those things. And I watched you work on those things. I was there when you asked for feedback about how I'm doing. And now you're saying you've measured it again and you've seen a big impact in that, in the area you want to pursue and get better at. That's remarkable.
Yeah, it's very rewarding. And you feel as if you've accomplished something. Now I remember, and kudos to you, because you pushed me out of my comfort zone in many ways. And one of the conversations you and I had, if you recall, because with leading two business units, it's almost as if I had to have two different leadership styles, because they were at two different maturity levels, like completely different. And I remember you and I talked about this concept of the Buddha Hercules versus Buddha.
Yeah, that's right.
And I've referenced that so many times because it is so true. It's when do you bring people together for that discussion, to have that collective thought, versus when do you step in as a leader and say, wait a second, time out, we need to make this decision, let's move in this direction. I think that having that balance in any leadership role, I think, is so critical, because there's oftentimes where you are going to have to be Hercules and step in and make a decision, and there's going to be many times where you're better off being Buddha and bringing people together and having harmony and creating being in sync, right? So kudos to you, because that's a concept that, quite frankly, I wasn't really versed to before meeting you. And then something that I have often referred to with my own team, and they get a laugh about it, because they can clearly tell when I'm being more Buddha versus more Hercules, right? So that's the funny thing.
Amazing. Well, I can't let the moment pass without acknowledging the Professor Martha Mesnetsky, who also led your leadership program.
She was wonderful
at Ivey, and that's a that framework or that concept of Hercules Buddha is something she developed about how leaders need to be during times of complexity. So want to give her that shout out. But I have found it very useful and it resonates. And I'm thrilled that it's resonated for you and you think about it and you carry it with you.
Absolutely.
Let me share a little story because obviously I spread that framework a lot. I use it in some of my conversations with leaders. And I actually recently, so I was using it a lot when we first met, and then it kind of got tucked away for a bit, and I brought it back out, and I was leading a leadership session of people kind of in the nonprofit and government world, kind of a leadership program that I've been working on for a while. And I brought out Hercules meets Buddha. And you know what was interesting, actually quite fascinating to me, is I got a lot of pushback on it, which caught me off guard. But I'll tell you what the pushback was. Any guesses on what the pushback might have been?
Something they're just told what to do. They're not given an opportunity to have that in-sync conversation, I believe.
Yeah, a little bit of that. But what was the big thing that I took away? Yeah, it did resonate for some people in the audience, but other people in the audience couldn't wrap their mind around the actual archetypes. They were two males, right? Two male archetypes, and they had people in the group that said, yeah, you're presenting Hercules as a hero, but he did a lot of bad things too. And then somebody else said, yeah, Buddha left his family behind to go and pursue a higher calling, but he left his children behind and kind of deserted them. So he's got some, and so it was very interesting for me to hear that because it taught me that, I got to set this up properly, make sure that people recognize I'm not presenting these people as perfect. They're archetypes.
Yes.
But what it did remind me or lead us into a conversation of is even the best leaders, they're human and flawed, right?
Indeed.
And
all of us.
We do have to accept each other. We're all flawed. And so there's no real perfect example of the best leader you can draw on. It's all areas, shades of gray, and just being deliberate and aware of, how you're seen and how you want to be seen.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, but I'm glad that resonated for you. It's something that I hold quite dearly as a bit of an aspiration. I try to always be both Hercules and Buddha, and for me, it's a little bit more work to be Hercules, but I try. I think for you, it was a little bit more work to spend more time in Buddha.
It's funny, but in the two different business units, it's the opposite.
Yeah.
In one, it was I was struggling to be more Buddha, and the other was I was struggling to be more Hercules. So it's incredible how it is very much situational.
Yeah, it is. I guess that's
depending
true.
on the dynamic, right? But yeah, no, it's been a great tool.
Yeah, awesome. So one of the things I recall from that leadership experience, we did this experiential learning where we went outside. It was cold, it was winter, it was snowing, and we did some kind of physical activities. One of the things I picked up about you, and with that intention you had told me about wanting to be less directive, and I got to witness through these kind of activities in the snow, these outdoor activities, that I could actually witness how you could be directive at times. Again, from a very caring way. You want to look after people. You had the answer. You had perspective on how we could solve this challenge. But I also watched over the period where you shared with your colleague, the other participants in the program, you shared with them what you were trying to work on, and you invited them to kind of tap you on the shoulder or give you feedback. And we had this session of feedback at the end where you were all supporting each other, and you were really gracious in how you accepted feedback when people said, sometimes I found you a little bit directive. You took it really, really well. Is it hard? Is it hard to take feedback like that from other people? Tell me what that feels like for you.
Yeah, I think, the business side of me would say, no, Shaquille, it's not hard at all. It's great to get feedback. And the human side of me will tell you, it's very hard. Yeah. It's very hard to hear that honest feedback because as leaders, whether whether you're, as a father, as a husband, or as a leader of an organization, you are always striving to be the best that you can be for your people, for your teams, and your surroundings. But sometimes you fall short of that, or you become more directive and you overstep. So getting the feedback helps level set you and it puts things in perspective. And I think taking it, there's two ways to look at it. One is taking it as a criticism or an insult, versus the other is taking it through the lens of, if you truly want to be better, then how do you embrace the feedback to understand it, dissect it, and figure out, okay, how do I do it differently moving forward? And I think that to me is pivotal, because that will completely transform how a leader views things, right? If it comes across as confrontational or comes across as in that manner, then you'll never accelerate. I think it comes down to, how do you take the feedback, digest it, and figure, okay, now what's the best path forward? So was it hard? Yeah, it was hard for sure. Was it a bit rewarding? Because it was, yes, please call me out on the things that I'm doing wrong so I can see it and feel it and experience it. But the good thing that happened out of that discussion was the dialogue with some of those individuals post the program, and us checking in on each other. Hey, how are things going? Are you still holding yourself accountable to some of these things? That's kind of cool.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know that was happening. That's awesome.
Yeah, but it does come from a level. It does come from a circle of trust for sure. And I think the people that love and respect you the most will give you that feedback, and you need to embrace it, because at the end of the day, it comes from a good place, and you need to utilize that as a catalyst to improve your leadership style.
Yeah, I love it. One of the activities that we did in that circle, I had asked all of you to go away, prepare feedback for each other. And one of the things I gave you was develop a metaphor for each person. So when you're giving them feedback, you kind of give them a gift of this metaphor. You actually specifically didn't do that. So I was being directive, and you said, I'm not doing that. But what you did was so much better. You love to read. You love to read business books, leadership books. And so you actually gave each individual a specific suggestion of a book that would be helpful to them based on what they were trying to do and work on. I was really amazed by that. I was moved by that, because it actually takes a really deep level of thinking to say, here's what I see in this person. Here's what they see in themselves. Here's something that I can provide that might help them on their journey. Is that something you regularly do? Like read a lot and then recommend to people things that you think would be helpful to them?
So I've been privileged enough to be involved in some leadership programs within CHEP. And part of these leadership programs have been around developing different skill sets. And they've assigned either work from books for us to read. And oftentimes I've purchased books for my leadership team that I thought would be useful, especially in times of turmoil, or times where things are a bit difficult. How do we kind of rally together and get alignment? In that particular example that you gave about that feedback session, it was interesting because with a couple of the individuals that were in there were books that popped in my mind immediately in my interactions with them, that I thought, wait a second, this would be a wonderful thing for this individual to read, because it would provide a different perspective and actually be aligned with what they're working on. Yeah. And oftentimes we don't realize that the power that reading has, and it influences us, and it influences more it challenges our thought process. It challenges us from the perspective of, are we looking at things through multiple lenses, or are we just so narrow-minded in the way we look at things? So that's where I think some of those books really helped, and in fact, I think they appreciated that.
Yeah, I think so too. Which also leads me to believe, as a coach, sometimes I provide reading recommendations to people or send them articles, but sometimes I wonder whether that behavior itself is directive, because I'm saying, I've seen you, I've read this would be really good for you to read. But what you're kind of demonstrating to me is that actually, like, being directive sometimes is not a bad thing. It's just how you do it.
Yeah, I think it's necessary. Like, as a leader, there are certain times where you need to be a bit more directive, right? If someone is not meeting your expectations, if someone is going in a direction that is not best suited for the organization or for themselves, as a leader, you owe it to yourself to get them back on the right course. And sometimes that takes a bit of a more directive conversation, right? If you always if you put yourself in a position where you avoid directive conversations, in my personal opinion, I don't think you'll be successful. I don't think you can function that way. But what you need to do is you need to balance it from the perspective of, if you're creating a vision and a sense of purpose, and people buy into that vision and understand why they do what they do, then as you're providing some directive feedback, it's not viewed that way. It's viewed more from a coaching lens.
Yeah. Amazing. I really do think that's important to discuss these days, because there's so much conversation, at least in my world that I play in, around executive coaching and facilitation, which is, you got to help people come to their own answer. But as a leader, particular leader of a large organization with lots of things going on in the organization and in the world, quite frankly, there are times that, when you do know the answer, or you do know something is very clear, and you have a responsibility to share share that directly. And then how you help them get through that, you can be more non-directive there, but you do have a responsibility to be clear and direct. Yeah. Awesome. I want to use these conversations in my second kind of launch of them to learn more about different aspects of what's happening in the business world today. And obviously in the last few years, kind of maybe kicked off by the pandemic, but maybe it was already going to happen, is the significant disruptions in supply chains that are happening out in the world. Kind of what's your take on what's happening with supply chains, and is there an end in sight, do you think? In kind of getting to a place where things are a bit more predictable, things are flowing a bit easier. Just what's your view? I assume there's no right or wrong answer here. I'm just interested in your perspective.
Yeah, I think over time we might get a bit more stability. I think right now in the supply chain world, there's a struggle to control cost. There's a bit of a balancing act around our dollar underperforming and understanding how does that impact the flow of goods throughout the supply chain. There's challenges with things as simple as like the grocery code of conduct and getting people to kind of all play fairly across different organizations. But I think it just shows you that organizations now more than ever need to be more agile. They need to be more flexible. They need to understand that maybe they operated in a world before where they leveraged a 3PL network and now they're going to bring things in-house or the opposite. I think it comes down to showing the willingness to be flexible and the willingness to partner with other supply chain leaders. So one thing that I share with my customers all the time is there are certain things that you cannot solve on your own. And there are certain things that you should bring in your other supply chain partners to help solve. And it may not be a perfect world, but it helps accelerate things. It helps us benefit each other throughout that process. And I think more than ever now, you're finding there's a lot more collaboration going on between retailers, manufacturers, 3PLs, transporters, because we all realize that we all need each other throughout this process. So instead of being so narrow-minded or looking in your own backyard, it really, you need to broaden your horizon and understand kind of what the challenges are, but then influence your teams to have conversations out in the field with some of these like partners of yours to see how do you solve for some of these common challenges. Yeah. And that means, is there an opportunity for us to do like shared warehousing space? There's an opportunity for us to use shared transportation resources and look at transportation orchestration, right? Removing empty miles. Is there a way for us to create stickiness between retail partners and manufacturers? So there's different things that we can do. And I think that, when you talk about stability or predictability, consumer behavior has been so erratic over the course of the pandemic that it still continues. I'll give you an example. Walking through a retailer 2 weeks ago, and there was still a panic on buying water over the solar eclipse. Like it was incredible, right? So this behavior of the consumer is unpredictable sometimes, which is even more the reason why you need to remain agile and flexible.
Amazing. The thought would have never crossed my mind that with the eclipse coming, there would be a run on bottled water. Like I would never make that connection.
Bizarre.
So I guess there's some people that thought this was a doomsday scenario. And we better be ready and hunker down.
Well, it's incredible, how people interpret things, I guess, right? But
yeah. And those kind of shifts in consumer behavior and how those catch actually affect the supply chain and the inventories and demand. It's
Well, look what happened during the pandemic, right? In the pandemic, it was very obvious in Canada that retailers were caught with very low inventory levels, right? Because they always wanted to be just in time. And they wanted to maintain costs, which in a perfect world makes complete sense. I get it. Yeah. But the issue that you have in that scenario is then you have a lot of pressure put on the manufacturers to hold on to more inventory.
Right.
So then what happened during the pandemic was everybody was hand to mouth. Everyone was just trying to get product out their door, out to the retailers. So now the influx of that is everyone is destocking. So retailer sales are slightly dropping, but at the same time, what's interesting about that is that they're not drawing in as much because they have to get rid of older inventory. Right. So there's so many things happening. I think it'll take us years before we completely level everything off. And then that coupled with the fact that our dollar is underperforming is a challenge.
Yeah. Such a complex thing. One thing I'll just share, and maybe you've heard this as well from your people. I was talking to one person on your team a couple of years ago, it was a year and a half ago, where they were saying that during the pandemic, they really realized that what they do for a living, supporting company supply chains, was a high calling. Because, everybody needed supply chains to work well, whether it be needing food in the grocery store, needing home delivery, needing, masks and vaccines moved around, is this person who said to me that I realized how important the work I do is to keeping people's lives moving forward, keeping people safe, keeping people happy. And again, supply chains are one of those things that when things go wrong, yes, everybody's arms are up in the air, but they don't realize when things are going right, it's not that it's simple. It's that there's a lot of people working together to collaborate, as you said, to make these things work.
Absolutely. It was interesting during that time, Shaquille, because I had just taken over the business 6 months before the pandemic. So one thing that we did with our employees when people start to understand the importance that we play, we were having coffee calls every week to keep people engaged in the business. But it was also to share what we were doing to ensure supply chain continuity, right? And I think it was during that time that it resonated with people as to the importance that we play, and also down into their families and into their households, how important he or she's job was to the organization in order to ensure supply chain continuity.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, I'm going to switch gears now as we're coming into the last few minutes of our conversation. Time has gone really fast. What are you working on next for your own leadership? What's kind of next on the horizon for you to be working on?
So for me, it's about effective communication. And I think it's around how do I convey the story and the messaging. So oftentimes, I may have a speaking engagement and somebody will come up and say, "Oh, that was fantastic. I really enjoyed it." And I feel the complete opposite. I feel like it was a complete miss, and I didn't really articulate the message the way I wanted to. So now I'm hiring a coach to help me with really that leadership presence and having that level of articulation and being able to storytell. Because any effective leader, I think, has to focus on that. And it's interesting because when I talk to other leaders of other organizations, it's not that necessarily everyone enjoys talking to the big audience. It's not that people, but it's necessary. It's necessary when you're talking to your teams. It's necessary when you're talking abroad to different organizations. So to me, that is my single biggest investment right now in myself, is that in particular, because it really is important, especially as I continue to evolve and grow in my career and move into different roles. That's an important part of that piece.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, the power of a leader's words and presence can move people to do amazing things. It can move people to feel something that makes them act in ways. So I think that's amazing that you're investing time and energy, and you recognize the importance not just of the words you say, but how you say them and how you deliver them in your presence. Congratulations, that's fantastic.
Yeah,
wish you well on that journey for sure. And then the last question I want to ask you is, as we have lots of people listening to my podcast, thank goodness. What do you think is advice you'd give to an up and coming leader right now to think about as they face the future?
I think it's really important that people step outside their comfort zone and really challenge themselves. I think it's really important that people understand the importance of their actions and their words. And not only that, but I think it's important that people take the time to self-reflect on what's working and what's not working. Oftentimes, I think as leaders, we think we're doing the right thing, but we're not soliciting the feedback to verify whether or not that's resonating with our teams. Yeah. So, in leadership roles, leadership roles are truly a privilege that are not given to many people. And when you've been given that opportunity, you need to take it very seriously and realize that you're impacting many lives. So all of your actions and interactions really do count. And so my only ask to everybody is really think about how you would want to be led and what works for you, and force yourself to emulate those things. Force yourself to emulate those people that have mentored you throughout your careers. Because I think for me that's really been key for me. And surround yourself with good people. And this is a great example. The relationship that you and I have would not have been possible if it wasn't for me trying different things and trying to improve my leadership skill set. Right?
Yeah, and that you totally drew me in your approach to do that. So thank you for that. I'm very proud to consider you now a friend, and I'm glad to have you in this conversation. So I'm going to try something new. I have never done this before in any podcast. I'm going to do I hear these rapid fire questions that get a little bit kind of personal. So we'll do 2 or 3 rapid fire questions. Are you an early bird or a night owl?
Night owl.
Night owl. So you stay up late.
I do.
After everybody goes to bed?
I take care of my girls and my wife, my kids, and then I'm back online getting things done.
Okay, fantastic. What's your favorite book that you're either reading right now or you read recently?
Dare to Lead.
Dare to Lead. Oh, that's Brene Brown?
That is.
That's Brene Brown. Excellent. Okay, good one. Favorite vacation spot?
Ooh, I love cruising. I love cruising.
Oh, okay.
It's my favorite.
Okay, so where's the last place you went on a cruise?
We were on a New Year's cruise, and we were across the Western Caribbean.
Oh, okay. I think I've done that cruise. I've done 2 cruises. I think there's a place for them. I like the other things too, but that's awesome. So
I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed to tell you how many cruises I've been on.
Do you want to say?
27.
27. All over the world?
Typically in the Caribbean, and there was a period of time where it was the only time that I could separate from the buess. So I figured, let's go on a cruise. And,
that's true, right? Yeah, because it's way too expensive to be online on a cruise. So,
there's a period of time where it wasn't even an option. Like it was really,
yeah, awesome, very good. And then I'll ask you the last question: is there one hobby that you wish you had more time for?
Golfing.
Oh, okay. Nice to know that there's still people out there that want to play golf.
Yeah, I like the outdoors. I definitely wish I had more time for that.
Awesome. I play once a year for a charity tournament that I sponsor, and that's about it. So that is a good way to spend time outside for sure.
Yeah, enjoy the fresh air, have a walk.
Yeah, awesome. Frank, thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your generosity. I know you're juggling lots of things, and just the fact that you gave me this 45 minutes, I'm very grateful. So I appreciate it, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Shaquille, thank you so much. It was my pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I did. Let me share with you some key things I took away from that, and hopefully you took away some different things as well. So first of all, hard to have a conversation of summary takeaways without talking about his approach to leadership as family. Frank really emphasized how he treats his team like a family, his business team like a family, stressing the importance of unity and collective care, even through disagreements. And his family-style approach extends to community engagement, with his team being encouraged to volunteer and enhance their sense of belonging with the company. Related to that, he talked about personalization and connection with his team. He really underscored the importance of personal touches in his leadership. He mentioned the example of getting to know everybody's birthdays and not just sending a card or an email. He actually sent personalized messages by text, so those individuals in the company knew that he was thinking about them and wished them well. So this approach, as I saw it, really strengthens the bonds with his team. I was able to witness him in his organization with all his people, and clearly drives a feeling of genuine value and belonging with the team. So I would say that the next big thing I took away was his whole focus on his own leadership and personal development. He acknowledged the never-ending journey of leadership growth. He shared his commitment to continual self-improvement and change and adaptation. He stressed the importance of being open to feedback and learning from what others are saying to him. In fact, seeking feedback to adjust his leadership style according to what his team needs. We talked a lot about his ongoing pursuit of becoming a better leader, how when we first started, he was working on approaching his leadership of his 2 organizations differently based on the circumstances. Now he's working more on his leadership presence. So kudos to Frank for always pursuing and analytically pursuing his approach to leadership growth and development. Lastly, from an industry perspective, he talked about the collaboration that's happening in the supply chain. His vantage point, given CHEP's business, really does put him in the middle of a number of partners working to move goods, sometimes very critical goods, through retail and distribution channels to get to end consumers. And he has said that given the challenges we've seen in the last several years, particularly during the pandemic and the disruptions that's all caused, that he is seeing more and more now companies within the supply chain being willing to work collaboratively in creativity, whether it be retailers, manufacturers, third-party logistics companies, working to overcome the challenges in the supply chain as partners and not just as businesses competing with each other. So all good insights from Frank. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed that episode. Take care. Thank you for listening. Whether you're a regular listener or joining us for the first time, I want you to know how much I value your support. Your engagement with our content is what keeps us going. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please take a moment to rate, review, and share the episode. It truly helps us reach more listeners like you. To learn more about my work, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Visit oceanbluestrategic.com, summitvalue.com, or the coaching page at the Ivey Academy. Thanks to Lindsay Curtis, who helps me edit and produce this podcast, and an exceptional thanks to my favorite indie band, Late Night Conversations, for providing me the music for this podcast. Discover more about them on Instagram at LNC Connected and enjoy more of their music as we close out today's episode.
Well, I can't flow like this no more. No, I can't make it. Far behind my eyes. Mediation, suffocation, it'll break me. Information in disguise. But when your eyes finally found mine, you were fair, but I'm defined by the chaos in my mind. I believe what I perceive is a weave tearing at the seams, and I wonder what's behind. And my ears are bleeding, and the reason isn't the logic of the season, taking the pleasing from my soul and leaving me to die. And I feel the lacing, LNC like racing, unstationary animation taking me from the purpose of my life.